Annabelle Creation. Who expected this to not only be watchable, but actually the best movie in the Conjuring series? Even I wasn't expecting to like this movie as much, even considering the fact that I did enjoy David Sandberg's last movie, Lights Out. But lo and behold, he's made another good horror movie. Love you, David. You make good things. You're the best. Well done. Good job. First, some context. The first Conjuring movie was good, being an outlier in its own genre by having actual likable characters at the core of the movie. The Warrens are not only active protagonists, but the relationship is so heartwarming that it completely energizes the movie. It's also pretty creepy, despite some kind of stupid stuff in it. For example, the mom not making a bigger deal of clearly hearing someone else in the closet while playing hide and clap. For me, the movie also has a bit of a structural issue, where the movie sets such a great and creepy tone for its first two acts, only to just give up and end with a loud, boring, and chaotic exorcism scene. Another issue, which actually really hurt the experience for me, but isn't exactly the film's fault, is that the marketing focused so much on giving away the best scares, sometimes even just showing scenes straight out of the film in lieu of trailers. But overall, it's pretty good, but I'd really only give it a 6 out of 10. Then you got the first Annabelle movie, which is borderline unwatchable. Not only is the demon's power set completely inconsistent throughout the movie, the tone of the movie doesn't even match that of the creepy-ass opening scene from The Conjuring that people liked and got the spin-off made in the first place. Instead of being a subtly creepy spook fest, it ends up being a boring and unlikable Rosemary's Baby ripoff. The main actress gives such a boring and phoned-in performance, and the bus scene feels like it was ripped straight out of a horror edit of The Room. Then the entire final set piece of the movie plays out like a fucking Ren and Stimpy episode. The movie even looks bland despite being set in the colorful 60s and being directed by a fucking cinematographer. The only positive aspects of the movie are Alfre Woodard's performance, because she's inherently likable, and the elevator scene is actually kind of creepy. But the only remotely good sequence, aka said elevator scene, wasn't even directed by the credited director John R. Leonetti.
Let me just put it this way. James is the one that it was his idea to do, to add the elevator into the scene.
Okay.
And let's face it, I mean, it was a very scary scene before we even added the elevator as a part of it. But that really, yes, we did know. James knew for sure. And
although, who could have expected this movie to be bad, considering that it is from the acclaimed director of Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Mother, you're alive. Too bad you will die.
Who somehow keeps getting work as a director. Then you got The Conjuring 2. It's a sequel that I think is much better than the original, not only due to the fact that James Wan seems to have grown as a filmmaker in this movie, but the marketing does a great job with hiding the best scenes. In this movie, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are somehow even more likable together, despite Patrick Wilson's character becoming a bit of a dumbass in the last act of the movie. The scares are also so much more well crafted and more clever than they are in the original film, and the special effects look better than ever. The Nun, to me, is an interesting makeup effect and actually creeps me out a little bit despite looking like a tired Marilyn Manson. One effect also had me convinced that it was CGI, only for me to learn later that it was not CGI. It's really cool and you'll know it when you see it. I wouldn't dare spoiling it if you haven't seen it yet. Despite the vast improvements, it still doesn't overcome the big issue of the original, and is even kind of amplified, in that the last 20 or so minutes just stops being scary and just starts being loud instead, although I would definitely recommend this one over the first film. But Creation ends up avoiding the one problem that I had with the two main entries in the Conjuring series. And unlike the first Annabelle movie, it's actually watchable and enjoyable. The main girls have a really charming friendship that ends up being an effective way of endearing the audience to the characters, though a minor complaint that I have is that the other girls are kind of flat and boring characters without much personality. Creation's greatest strength, however, is the fact that it is really scary, almost from the very first scene. There's one jump scare towards the beginning of the film that I won't spoil that I feel is kind of pointless, but beyond that, it's all aboard the fear train. I am afraid of letting myself accomplish life. Sandberg has proven to be skilled at putting together a scene based entirely around the way that it's lit, doing a lot of clever things with the way night and day are seen traditionally in horror films. While Creation does indulge in some cliches, most of the time it puts an unpredictable spin on them. For example, the tired trope of trying to get away from a monster in a car but the car won't start cliche? It doesn't go the way that you would expect. Creepy scarecrow cliche? Well, if we're getting The Nun, I hope that we're also getting the Scarecrow. A small thing that I really want to praise the movie for is how it deals with kids in peril. Most of the time in movies, it ends up being unintentionally hilarious, not just in the fact that kids are inherently evil, but also that most movies seem to either sanitize the violence, make the kids really unlikable, or just sees the filmmakers making the worst possible aesthetic choices around these kinds of scenes. Sandberg somehow manages to make it feel real and as if the characters are actually in danger, unlike some other upcoming movies. Through writing that actually has the kids making decisions that you would see kids making, or by showing the actual peril, but in a sparse way that leaves the horror up to your imagination. Even the final act of the movie manages not to devolve into the loud, dumb exorcism scene that the good movies in this series end up doing. Instead, Creation does what a proper horror movie should do, and actually gets scarier as it goes on, with the climax actually scaring the living shit out of me. While again, the powers of the demon in this movie are definitely still inconsistent with that from the opening scene of The Conjuring, it's still more consistent than it's depicted in the first Annabelle movie. However, I have a massive issue with the film that has to do with the ending. So that means spoiler warning. The movie drops the ball a little bit story-wise with the way that it wraps up. Instead of giving us any sort of emotional payoff with the character that we've been attached to for a majority of the film instead to just pay off with, "These are things I recognize.
These are things I know."
To make things even worse, they're not even callbacks to a good movie, as the last shot literally goes into the original Annabelle film. I don't want this good movie to remind me of a movie that's almost unwatchable. There is also a scene towards the middle of the movie where a character is clearly in danger, and there are other characters barely a few feet away. Not only that, but the character in danger is specifically in a handicapped, injured state, so you would expect the other characters to keep a close eye on her, at least even fleetingly. The scene goes on for a while to the point where it almost gets a bit annoying, and even infuriating to a degree. If it was a little bit shorter, I might have been able to tolerate it, but at the length that it is in the current cut, it is a glaring flaw for me. However, Creation is a movie that I would overall recommend. It's unexpectedly solid. It's like being lactose intolerant, then eating spoiled ice cream, but then it turns out your poop came out alright. First, why would you do that in the first place? In other words, the mere existence of this movie implied that it would not be good given the fact that it is a sequel to a prequel that's also a prequel to a movie that was okay, but then said prequel was bad. However, the final product is kind of amazing. Definitely, it's some of the most fun I've had this summer, second probably only to Atomic Blonde, which I would also recommend. Also, this is the only Conjuring movie to actually earn its fucking R rating. Annabelle Creation is a movie that I am currently going to give a high 6 or maybe even a 7 out of 10. By the way, director David Sandberg has recently released a really informative series of videos called Directing Annabelle Creation, which has been a really compelling watch, as he explains what it was like to direct the film on set. If you're looking for more insight on the making of the film, but also the craft of directing, kind of, I would recommend checking it out. It's definitely more informative than a lot of video essays I've seen on YouTube or Vimeo. I'd also recommend checking out some discussions of the movie on Reddit because the director himself is actually very active and you'll probably know him when you see him. Chances are, if you say something, he'll probably even reply to you. So yeah, check it out.